Hello, I'm Asif Farouk of Finextra, and today I'm with Lázaro Campos of FinTechStage. So Lázaro, thank you for joining me. Fintech has seen an explosion around Europe, particularly centred in London, but what does the rest of the European fintech environment look like?
So yeah, you're quite right. There is a lot going on in fintech. There is a lot of headlines, Finextra and others, talking about significant changes, significant investment, significant activity. Now, much of it, as I hope we talk about later, I think is superficial. We really are not addressing the significant challenges that are facing the fintech and specifically the banking sector, and are really not addressing infrastructure issues where much of the activity should be happening. Now, that set aside, right to say that London versus the continent, there is a significant gap. That gap, I think, is changing. European capitals and European players are much more involved and more engaged than they were before. But there is still a gap to breach. Now, some of that has to do with the City of London being a financial centre of the size and the importance that it has, and also that in Europe there are a number of financial centres, but there is no one that comes out to compare to the level that we see in London, and also that London entrepreneurship, I think, in the UK is much more ingrained than in Europe. I think over the years, if there is one challenge for Europeans at large, or non-UK based Europeans, is that I think we've lost a bit the entrepreneurial spirit. I think that needs to be rekindled. I just a piece. There was a study done with university students in a business school actually in Belgium, and a business school in Mumbai. Same question was asked: how many of you, this is last year's students, how many of you believe that you will work for yourselves when you graduate, and how many of you believe that you will work for somebody else? The results were exactly the same, 98%, 2%, but they were answering the question in a different way. 98% of Belgium-based were expecting to work for somebody else. 98% of Mumbai students expected to create their own success. That's a telling story.
Very interesting. Let's talk about what excites you in the whole finance, banking and fintech space. Are there any particular technologies, maybe even companies, that stand out for you?
Well, companies, I'm not sure that there is one that stands out. I think that what excites me is that now the talk is about the real issues, the real infrastructure issues. Now, we are far away from the action. I think there is a lot of talk about real-time payments, for example. To me, that is the core of what can become a very compelling customer-centric proposition, because we are really addressing the needs that are underpinning much of the difficulty we have. So I think we are starting to talk about the right issues, and not only regulators forcing people to change behavior, is more banks and startups starting to work on those. But we are far away from what I talk about, or what I name deep innovation. It's only starting. Much of what we see is superficial innovation. You know, Apple Pay, everybody gets excited. It's just another way of presenting credit cards, and we know that credit cards are not the right answer for the digital age. We know that is an instrument of the past, not of the future. That business model discussion, that infrastructure discussion, those really significant changes are going to take time, because they require vision, and they require patient investment that can wait for the right changes to happen, instead of just the quick turnaround and the quick sale.
Okay. So talking about this explosion, to go back to what appears to be an explosion of interest in this sector, do you think that will sustain, the momentum will sustain, or do you think we will look back at this particular era the same way we look back at the internet.com bubble of the 90s?
Right. I guess both. I think part of it, all of that is superficial. I think that's bubble level. But I think the real deep innovation is only starting. So we will look back at this era and we'll say, oh, that is where the rumblings started. That is where we started to address the real issues. That is where the banks started to create real innovation agendas for the long term. That is where investors, banks and startups started talking about what next and where should investment money go. And that's what FinTechStage is all about. Is getting the right players in a small community. These are small events. So those real players to talk about where investment is going and talking and deciding and guiding where investment should be going and is not. And that, I think, is a before and after. That is what is going to really break this sequence of superficial innovation and really start addressing the real issues.